Hello, everybody. Good evening, good day. I hope you're all doing very well, and welcome to the Indian Interest podcast, in which we discuss geopolitics mainly. So it's wonderful to be back amongst you all again after a break of a week. I was traveling, as you know, and so I hope you have all been well. And before we begin, let me see who all is there on the live chat. Let me greet all of you. I can see Dhairya, Fun Gamer, Jitesh, Bharat, Jain, Navdisha, Zhong Jina, Devashish, Karthik Iyer, Samarth Acharya, Ashwin Bhardwaj, Suman, Dhairya, Venkatesh, Bimla, Sriram, Jayesh, Bhupesh, Matteo Perez, Harsh Jain, Atul, Lage Raho Online, Tathagat, Akshay, Kalind, Rudraksh, Soman, Juna Das, Abhishek, Hello Tom, Sushant Gupta, Bhai Bhai, Dheeraj, Om Bekerikar, Chalta Firta, whatever, something. Devashish, Navdisha, Shobhajit, Ashish, XP1101, Suman, Ritvik, Fatty Just 8, Pavan Kumar, Tyagi, Tarun, Kalind, Navdisha, Sushant, Trupti, Sayantan, Kalind, Vlad, Chavda the Impaler, Sushant, Aditya Kumar Shaw, Amar Jyoti, Hello Tom, and many other people. Joseph Stalin is here. Well, we are blessed, I guess. Shivam, Priyanka, Darshan, Chinmay, Vladimir Putin is here. Wonderful. Herbie on Wheels, Sangit Kumar, Lucifer, Romeo, Sam, Shardul, Ankita, and lots of other people. I will not be able to greet you all individually, but thank you so much for being on the live telecast, on this live stream. And now let's get into the heart of the matter. What shall we discuss today? I have a number of topics I would like to discuss. So let us begin with the G20, the S20 thing. So this is the year of India's presidency of the G20 grouping of nations, and there's a whole host of events lined up throughout this year until the main summit happens. And all of these events will be held in India, in various parts of the country, in all across the nation, in a variety of different cities. So everybody, wherever you are, if you are living in a reasonably big size city, most likely you will get a taste of the G20 proceedings and India's role in that, India's presidency of the G20 grouping of nations. So I also participated in the S20 thing, S20 initiation meeting, which was held in Puducherry last weekend. That's the reason why I could not do the live streams last weekend. So let's talk about that. Let's put some of these things on the screen, and let's talk about what this is all about. Let's give me a second. Here we are. Let's talk about the G20. So this is about G20. This is the G20.org website. As you can see, it has the Indian logo this year. Yes, on the top left. Uh, the group of 20, we know what it is. It was the inception happened in 1999. It was elevated to a leaders level in 2008. These are the member nations. So it comprises 19 nations: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the UK, and the US. It also has the European Union. The G20 members represent 85% of the world's GDP and over 75% of the global trade, and about two-thirds of the world's population, because India and China are part of it. Yeah. And this year you have guest countries: Bangladesh, Egypt, Mauritius, Netherlands, Nigeria, Oman, Singapore, Spain, and the UAE, and a number of invited international organizations like the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, WHO, WTO, and so on. And India, as G20 presidency, will be inviting the ISA, CDRI, and the ADB as guest IOs. ADB is the Asian Development Bank. CDRI is ISA is the International Solar Alliance, and so on. So there are three nations this year. So let's understand what the G20 presidency is all about. Every year, one nation on a rotation basis is given it takes over the mantle of the G20 presidency, and this nation steers the agenda for 1 year and hosts the summit. So there are two main parallel tracks: the finance track and the Sherpa track. Finance ministers and central bank governors take care of the finance track, and the Sherpas lead the Sherpa track after the finance track. So that's what it is. Within the two tracks, there are thematically oriented working groups in which various representatives from various ministries and other nations participate. And there are engagement groups that bring together civil society, parliamentarians, think tanks, women, youth, labor, businesses, and researchers of the G20 countries. The presidency is supported by a troika, the previous president, the current president, and the incoming next year's president. So this year it's India supported by Indonesia and Brazil. And we have had a whole bunch of summits going from starting from 2008 onwards. Uh, and this is, I'm not sure what this is. It's an error message. That's fine. So we have three tracks. One is the finance track, in which we have global macroeconomic issues, and it's got a whole number of working groups: the framework working group, the international financial architecture, infrastructure, sustainable finance, global partnership, joint finance and health task force, international taxation agenda, financial sector issues. These are the various working groups. Then you have the Sherpa track, in which you have agriculture, anti-corruption, culture, digital economy, disaster risk reduction, development, education, employment, environment and climate, energy, health, trade and investment, and tourism. That's what it is. Then you have a number of engagement groups. So you have business, civil, labor, parliament, science, SAI, Supreme Audit Institutions, Startup 20, Think 20, Urban 20, Women 20, and Youth 20. So I participated in the Science 20 initiation meeting that was held in Puducherry last weekend. This engagement group comprises of the national science academies of the G20 nations. It presents policymakers with consensus-based science-driven recommendations formulated through task forces comprising international experts. So the S20 website is now live. And when it comes to the G20 calendar, you have a whole lot of events that are going to happen across throughout the year. This is the calendar for February. You have the Sherpa track and the finance track, Bengaluru, Run of Kutch, interesting. Bengaluru again, Indore, Lucknow, Bengaluru, Khajuraho. That's for February. That's a whole lot of activities. And then you have March. A lot of stuff is happening. Gandhinagar, Chandigarh, Mumbai, Kumarakom, Udaipur, Amritsar, Hyderabad, Delhi, Gurugram, Guwahati, Darjeeling. You can see the Northeast is involved, Bengal is involved, Goa, Varanasi, Bhubaneswar, Odisha is involved. Very good to see that. And it looks like the future meetings have not yet been penciled in over here, but that's you get the idea. The entire nation gets a taste of this. Many events are going to be held in the northeast of the nation. Puducherry is a small town, more or less, but it also got a taste of the G20. So, it brings in a lot of enthusiasm from the various state governments and the local district administrations and the people. Everybody gets a taste of this big world event, which is wonderful. This is the Science 20 website, and we're going to have 5 total meetings in total of the S20 engagement group. The first one in Puducherry has already been done. This is for setting the stage. That's what the initiation meeting was about. The next meeting is going to be in Agartala. It's going to be about clean energy for a greener future. Yes. The next one is after that is in Lakshadweep, Bangaram Island. It's about universal holistic health. The next one is in Bhopal. It's about connecting science to society and culture. And the final meeting, which will synthesize all the policy recommendations, is going to be held in Coimbatore. And that document, which will come out of the Coimbatore meeting, the final synthesized document, will be passed on to the G20 secretariat, the main secretariat. So that's how it's all going to be. The focus areas, let's take a look at overview of S20. So this year, under India's presidency and leadership, India has proposed the following themes with 3 focal points. One is a call for universal holistic health with an emphasis on prevention of disease instead of treating diseases. Then adoption of clean energy for a greener future. And the third one is connecting science to society and culture. The S20 engagement group is Dr. Vijay Bhatkar, Dr. Ajay Sood, and Professor and Dr. Gautam Desiraju, who was recently on this channel in a podcast about a book that Dr. Desiraju has written. So these 3 scientists are the engagement group. They are the 3 leaders, and the S20 secretariat is based in the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, where I was last week. I was very graciously and kindly hosted by the Indian Institute of Science, and I interacted with the students. I had an offline session of Ask Abhijit, very interesting, very fun. More than 100 students came. I was very surprised, and it lasted almost like 90 minutes. It could have lasted longer if we had not eventually called a halt to that. So this is the engagement group. Everything is being done from the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, and mainly it is Professor Desi Raju who is spearheading, who is leading this entire the entire matter, right? Uh, so that's what it is. Now let's take a look at some tweets. This is the G20 India Twitter handle. So this was about the Science 20 Inception meeting, which was held on January 30 in Puducherry. The first session, I mean, I participated in this. The first session was let's pause that, was the welcome address, and it was about disruptive science for inclusive and sustainable development. The second session of the day was universal holistic health, cure and prevention of disease. The third one was clean energy for a greener future. And the fourth one was connecting science to society and culture. So these are the four sessions that were held on January 30. And now let's take a look at the proceedings, just to give you an overview of how these events are held, what it looks like. Let's take a taste of this. So this was an event that was held on the 29th of January, a day before the main event, and delegates from various countries arrived to this place, and Professor Desi Raju kicked off the welcome dinner with opening remarks and introduced the goals and the agenda of the S20 meetings. And the same day we had a cultural performance. So this was about, so the international delegates got a taste of Indian culture and music. So we had classical music and all that. Then the next day, this was the venue where the event was held. It was in Puducherry. You can see what it looks like. And then we had various addresses. The first one was by Professor G. Rangarajan, who is the director of the IISc. He spoke about the big challenges such as climate change, pandemics, and all those things that we need to address, that the G20 and the S20 engagement group should address. Then Professor Ashutosh Sharma gave an address, and he spoke about furthering scientific research, education, and all that. And we had these big screens where you could see what was happening in case you were in a corner or slightly far away from the podium. Then it was the turn of Mr. Mohandas Pai, who gave a brilliant, almost 1 hour presentation about what progress we have achieved in the last 100 years. It's possible to achieve more than that in the next 10-20 years itself. And he gave a very good overview of the areas in which we can focus. What are the areas of disruptive science and technology which will impact the future of the world, like AI, alternate energy, and a lot more. So he spoke very well about this. It was a very interesting, very brilliant talk that he gave, and everybody unanimously appreciated what he said, the speech that he gave, the presentation that he gave. Then there was a talk by Dr. Bhushan Patwardhan of IIT Delhi, in which he spoke about no, Mr. Patwardhan is not IIT Delhi. He's I can't remember which institute he's aligned with, but he spoke about universal holistic health. This was the thing, and then this is a tweet by Dr. Robin Grimes, who is the Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society. Then we had this is Professor Ambuj Sagar of IIT Delhi, who spoke about clean energy for a greener future. And there was more. This is Professor Rangarajan, his address. There was this group photograph that was taken during the lunch break, and then this was the next. This was that evening. There was a dinner in which I gave a 15-minute speech to. So this was the speech that opened off the dinner event. So I spoke for about 15-20 minutes. I spoke about the various challenges that the world is facing, the fact that we have been extremely lucky to have survived thus far, we as a species, human beings. And I spoke about the various challenges that are in store for us. We have gone through a lot. We are just coming out of the coronavirus pandemic, and there are going to be many more challenges in the future. We have to work together. Today, no problem or no issue is localized or isolated. Every problem that exists in the world is something that impacts the entire world. So we have to all work together. So I spoke about these issues. the fact that it is strange that we still haven't found solutions to legacy diseases like tuberculosis and malaria and dengue, and other things as well. uh, I spoke about the fact that it is very, I mean, we already have the resources and the means today to eradicate global poverty and world hunger, and we are still not able to do that, and we need to introspect as to why that's not happened. And then I spoke a little bit about Indian culture and history, and I invited the foreign delegates especially to embrace and experience Indian culture. I spoke about the fact that India is so incredibly diverse and pluralistic, and yet it's held together by what is clearly one single culture and civilization, which is Indian culture and civilization. So that's briefly what I spoke about for about 15 minutes or so. And then there was a cultural event, dance and all that. So this is a tweet by Professor Desiraju, who was the main essentially the leader who drove this entire event. It was all done under his leadership. So he has. So this is a much larger group photograph that was held later, and you can see that I am over here in over here in the background. Uh, and then the next day there was a tour of the Oroville area in Pondicherry, in which the delegates got to see got a bit of taste of the culture of the city, Puducherry. Yeah, so that's what this was all about. And then they have been tweeting, and this is my tweet: a successful Science 20 Inception meeting. The highlights were Mr. Mohandas Pai's brilliant talk and the G20 nations' unanimous support of India's 100-page proposal, which was tabled in this meeting. And yeah, kudos to the S20 engagement group in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and team led by Professor Desiraju that prepared India's proposal. And I've given a link to to India's proposal, which was unanimously praised and accepted by the uh, foreign delegates. So you can go to my Twitter and you can download or this proposal in case you are interested. Here is the proposal. It's about disruptive science for innovative and sustainable development. It's approximately 100 pages long. It's 117 pages, and you can take a look at that. I will not go into the details right now. So this is what it was all about. So let's understand what this means for India. I am part of the S20 S20 deliberations and activities. Overall, you have a lot more that's happening beyond science. There is business, there is entrepreneurship, there is education, there is the Sherpa track, there is the finance track, and so much more. It's a whole lot of events that are happening in India. It's all about coming to a consensus. It's mainly about diplomacy. These events are mainly diplomatic events. Even the science event was a diplomatic event, and it brings in a whole lot of delegates from other nations, from the G20 nations, into India, and it provides India the opportunity to showcase its strengths and to give these delegates a taste of Indian culture, Indian civilization, uh, and it also boosts tourism. So there are a lot of aspects that are covered in this. So it's a great chance for India to showcase its potential, its strengths, its institutions, its brilliant people to the rest of the world. So this essentially, people have been saying for the longest time that it's high time that India steps up to the world stage. People have been saying that India's time has finally arrived. So this is all in line with that. India's time has certainly arrived, and we are now able to take the leadership, even though it's a rotational leadership, so everybody gets that. But we are taking this to a whole different level. There have been a lot of summits that have been held in the past, but none of them has been organized on such a grand scale and such a large scale as the way India is doing it this year. So we are taking this to the next level, to a whole different level. It's about showcasing our strengths. It's about showcasing the fact that we are now on the global stage. We are one of the world leaders. We can drive development and the future. Yeah, so that's what it is all about. It's also going to give a significant boost to Indian tourism, because lots of people from other countries are coming into India, and they will certainly experience India. I exhorted them, the science delegates, to explore and embrace and experience India. It's a it's an experience it's a so it's an experience you will never forget. So this will now spread through word of mouth, and more people will come in. So it's great for India's tourism sector as well. So this is what it was all about, right? So that's the opening thing that I wanted to speak about, the G20 S20 thing. Lots of people have been asking about that, and that's what it is. And I believe there's a lag, because I'm going to come to a different topic now. All right, all right. Okay, I think the connection is good now. All right, so that was about the S20 and the G20. Now let's talk about what other things are are happening in the world. So one of the interesting events that has happened, that's still happening right now. Let's put it on the screen. It is this wonderful Chinese spy balloon, right? Let's put that on the screen. So this is the U.S. Department of Defense, and senior defense official holds a background briefing on a high altitude surveillance balloon. What does this balloon look like? Let's take a look at this. This is the clearest photo of the Chinese spy balloon so far. So that's what this Chinese spy balloon looks like. It's a very large balloon. It's very high in the atmosphere, and it clearly has these solar panels, and it has a payload which may consist of a surveillance equipment, maybe cameras, maybe some other equipment which is not visible from here. And yes, it is something that is capable of surveilling the landscape that it passes over. It's got a very high vantage point. So this spy balloon has intruded into US airspace. It is currently passing over the United States. The Chinese have accepted the fact that it's a Chinese balloon. They are claiming that this is a weather balloon or something like that, a meteorological balloon. It's not a spy balloon. It's just a meteorological balloon that has kind of strayed away from its originally planned course, and it's by mistake encroached into US territory. So they are saying that we are ascertaining the situation, and we are trying to verify what happened and why this balloon has intruded into US airspace. Uh, so this is what's called a stratospheric balloon. The stratosphere is one of the layers of the atmosphere of our planet. It begins roughly 10 kilometers above the surface, and it extends all the way to 50 kilometers roughly above the surface of the Earth. It's called the stratosphere because the air over there is stratified into various strata. And this balloon, I think it's about, they are giving the figures in feet. So I'm not sure how many feet, 60,000 feet or so, maybe 50, 60,000 feet above the surface of the planet. So that's what it is. This is an older image, and this tweet is from 2020. I'm not sure what it says. It says, what's this? Okay, I think it's over Japan. So these balloons that the Chinese manufacture, you can see this is a much, much clearer image. You can see it's got these solar panels and various other protruding antennas and equipment and all that. So this was a Chinese balloon over Japan. This also, they would say, was a mistake, apparently. Yeah. And so so people have been tweeting memes about this. Send American missiles to defend Ukrainian airspace. Great. Defend American airspace. No. So yeah, it's a set of these memes. So now, what is all this about? How do these stratospheric balloons work? Here's a visual guide. Yeah, the Chinese balloon is floating 60,000 feet over the US. And it's been described by the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, as a surveillance asset. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry says it's a weather balloon. But these balloons have intruded over various nations' airspace in the past 2-3 years. So there are no coincidences in geopolitics and in world affairs. If it happens once, we can understand, but if it happens multiple times, it's not a coincidence, and there's something fishy going on there. So this is a helium balloon. There are two gases that are extremely light. One is hydrogen, one is helium. Hydrogen is highly flammable. If you remember, in case there was this airship, a Zeppelin called the Hindenburg. It was a Nazi Germany made Zeppelin airship, and it caught fire over the US when it was landing in the 1930s or something. In the 1930s, I think 38, 39. Look it up in case you're interested. So that airship, that massive balloon, contained hydrogen. Hydrogen is highly flammable. It's very dangerous. Helium, on the other hand, is not flammable. So these days we use helium. and that's what it's like. It's got an inflation valve, a deflation valve. It has solar panels, and it has a payload which might include radar, cameras, and communication equipment, which would allow the balloon to transmit data in real time to satellites, and from the satellite to the uh, control station in China. So it's most likely a spy balloon. Let's take a look at the journey. So it originated in China. The airship came from China. The country's foreign ministry confirmed. It's a weather balloon, they say, and it drifted, of course. Then it passed over the Aleutian Islands, which will, these are American islands. So that itself is fishy. In these islands, they have various defense establishments over there, defense stations, naval stations, radar stations. So it flew over the Aleutian Islands, which is fishy. And then it entered the US airspace. It flew over Canada first, then it entered US airspace over Montana, and it flew over this facility in Montana, where you have these silos that contain ballistic missiles. So once again, it's passing over something, an establishment that's related to defense, US defense, and now it's floating over Missouri and so on. So how do these balloons navigate? So typically, if you release a balloon into the atmosphere, it's going to drift around as per the wind. The wind will take it wherever it wants, or wherever the wind wants to take it. But in the case of a stratospheric balloon, at different layers, in different layers of the stratosphere, the wind goes in different directions. And if the balloon has sensors that can sense at what altitude the wind is going in which direction, then it can rise or fall, increase its altitude or lower its altitude in order to follow a predetermined path. So this can be done through an autonomous computer on the balloon using AI, artificial intelligence, and through data it receives from satellites. And that's how you can actually navigate the balloon, just by making it go up or go down. This is something that even hot air balloonists do, in case you are interested in that. So hot air balloons, when someone's flying a hot air balloon, they take a look at the wind thermals, they take a look at the birds like eagles and vultures that are flying high in the air, and from that they can tell in what direction the wind is blowing at a certain altitude, and using that they can either go up or go down or come down and follow a certain trajectory that they would like to follow. So that's what this balloon apparently is also doing. So after this thing happened, Mr. Anthony Blinken, who was about to leave for China in the first ever visit of a high-ranking US official to China in many years, he abruptly cancelled the meeting. He said that the conditions are not right for this meeting to happen, for this trip to happen. Now people are saying, I think Donald Trump has called for shooting down this balloon. So it's not that easy. In the late 1990s, such a balloon went adrift in Canada. The Canadians sent their Air Force F-18 aircraft, and these aircraft fired more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition at that balloon. It definitely punctured the balloon, and what all it did was it made the balloon leak helium very slowly, and it took another 6 days for the balloon to come down. Yeah, so if it was hydrogen, it would burn immediately. You could also maybe fire a missile, but we don't quite know how a missile striking a balloon, what effect it would have. And the interesting thing is that because this balloon is not made of metal, it doesn't quite show up on defense radar, and it's flying so high that defense radar typically doesn't pick it up. So it's a very interesting low-tech technology that the Chinese have used to spy on the US. So yeah, it's not that easy. And the other thing is that if you shoot this down, then all that metal, all that it may not be metal, there may be some metal in it. All that solar panels and other equipment will come down. It may hit civilians, and it's so high that it could spread over a very large area, and we don't quite know what else could be on that, and it's best not to do it. So that's why the Americans have chosen not to shoot this down. And so it's clear that this balloon is going to keep on drifting around the US, across the US, and eventually it will exit US airspace from the eastern seaboard, from the east coast of the US. So yeah, it's saying meteorological research and so on. And like it says, in 1998, the Canadian Air Force did all that. It did not really work. They fired 1,020 millimeter cannon rounds into the balloon. It still took 6 days before it finally came down. Now there's another balloon right now So we have a balloon that's drifting over the US, and there is another balloon that is currently in the skies over Latin America. That's another Chinese balloon in the skies over Latin America. It's it's the size of three buses, and it's carrying a large payload, very similar to the one over the US. Strange object seen above Costa Rica as China investigates spy balloon claims. Yeah, so once again, there are no coincidences. Here is a report from La Nación, which is a Costa Rican publication. Globo Blanco volador. El globo blanco apareció la mañana de este jueves en diversos puntos del cielo costaricano. Whatever. Yeah, I don't quite speak Spanish, but yeah. So that's what's happening right now. Now, this is part of a larger pattern. Look at this. This is from January 6, 2022. Unidentified flying object over Port Blair, India. Triggers curiosity and rumors. The same kind of balloon flew over Port Blair in the Andaman Nicobar Islands on around January 6 last year. So they have used this over India. They are using it currently over the US and over Costa Rica and various Latin American nations. So this was used to spy over India. Would you believe it? And what else? Here is an article. It's from 2019. China is using high-tech balloons to spy on India from Tibet. But before we come to this, such balloons have flown over Japan as well. So this is no coincidence. Why would China be interested in the meteorological environment and weather over Japan, the US, Philippines, India, and in South America? It's clearly a spy balloon. You can see it's the same design, the same make of balloon that you see in all these different places. Or the Philippines, it's a different kind of balloon. It's more like a zeppelin, like an airship. So it's a pattern that you are seeing over the past 3-4 years. US now, Latin America right now, and in the past over India, over Japan, and over the Philippines. And this article says it's using high-tech balloons to spy on India from Tibet, from temporarily Chinese occupied Tibet. They're making these balloons fly high over the atmosphere, which gives them a high vantage point from which to spy into Indian territory from Chinese occupied Tibet. And you can see there they have these airship kind of balloons and various other balloons as well. Aerostats, Puma. So some of these balloons they have acquired from Russia. Puma aerostats, which have been deployed in China and other places as well. And they have deployed these aerostats in Tibet. They have sent a stratospheric balloon over Port Blair. Port Blair and the Andaman Nicobar Islands are a very sensitive place. India has significant defense establishments and infrastructure over there, naval as well as air force infrastructure in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. The Chinese would like to know what's happening, And these balloons are very unlike satellites. The thing about satellites is that they pass over the Earth very rapidly. Typically, roughly, let's say over 90 minutes. It takes about 90 minutes roughly on average to make one orbit of the Earth. But a balloon can loiter over a piece of real estate or a piece of territory indefinitely. Yeah. So that's why balloons are an interesting asset to use for spying. So that's what the Chinese are doing, and they don't quite show up on radar, and they're very high. So it's even really hard to send aircraft to intercept a balloon. India had the Foxbat, the MiG-25 fighter plane, which was a high supersonic fighter plane. Its speed was greater than Mach 2, more than twice the speed of sound, and its service ceiling was about 65,000 feet or so, which is typically I think it kind of reaches the height of this balloon. The F-18 that the US has also could reach an altitude of 60,000 feet at most. So these balloons are kind of above the ceiling of most high-end fighter aircraft. So it's kind of hard to bring them down. So it's a very interesting tactic the Chinese are using. So China has stratospheric balloons, and such balloons have also been deployed by Pakistan to, for instance, around the Khan Research Laboratories at Kahuta, where their illicit nuclear program is kind of based. The deployment of these balloons indicates the purpose of channelizing any attacking low-flying aircraft and manipulating them into an air defense kill zone and all that. So the Pakistanis also may have acquired such assets from the Chinese, possibly, So that's why India has to keep an eye on this. India has to take this very seriously. And maybe nations around the world now need to develop the ability to neutralize these threats. So yeah, that's an interesting development. The Chinese are always up to something. Now they're intruding over US airspace and flying their balloon over US ballistic missile facilities. Can you believe it? And they flew it over the Aleutian Islands also, where you have naval and air force and maybe some other facilities as well. And they have been spying on India as well, and on Japan, and on the Philippines. So this is interesting. I'm sure the Americans kind of find it funny, but it's not funny. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. So this is an interesting development that's happening right now as we speak. Two balloons active over the Americas right now, one over the US, one over South America, Costa Rica in the past, over Japan in the past, over India in the past, over Philippines. And it's something they just keep on doing, the Chinese. So interesting and kind of dangerous. Now let's talk about, what shall we talk about? Let us talk about, give me a second, let's talk about Armenia. So yesterday I was on a different channel, Jaipur Dialogues. I spoke about Turkey essentially, and so I spoke a bit about Armenia, Azerbaijan. So India is also involved in this matter right now. And what's happening? Something interesting has happened. Let's take a look at that. Let me put that on the screen. So this is, where is it? Here we are. This is an article from 2020. So we know that there is a conflict that's happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So the conflict, it goes back. It's a historical conflict that goes back to the beginning of the 20th century, and the conflict heated up in the late 1980s when the USSR was on the verge of breaking up. I think everybody could sense the direction in which things were going. The USSR was going to break up sooner or rather than later. And there is a territory called Nagorno-Karabakh, also known as Artsakh, which is the bone of contention. So historically, Armenia has occupied this. Let's take a look at the map to understand. So we know where India is. Let's go north and west, and we come to Turkey. And over here, between Turkey and Azerbaijan, there's this nation called Armenia. It's a very old nation, Armenia, at least 2,500 years old, right? And then, and Anatolia was entirely Greek. Cyprus was entirely Greek. And now we have Azerbaijan here, which is a Turkic nation. And the Turks want to essentially complete what they could not finish in the early 20th century. They want to eradicate Armenia, erase Armenia from the world map, and create a pan-Turan corridor. So on the other side of the Caspian Sea, we have Turkmenistan. So the Turks would like to create a corridor which connects Turkey to Azerbaijan and to Turkmenistan, and Armenia is in the way. So they would like to eventually, get rid of Armenia from the world map itself. And they are trying to do it piece by piece, piecemeal. So there is this territory called Artsakh, which is also called Nagorno-Karabakh. The two nations went to war, Armenia and Azerbaijan, in the early 1990s after the Soviet Union broke up, and Armenia was able to prevail in that conflict, and it took over. It was able to integrate Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh into its own territory. Then Turkey got involved, and they've been aiding Azerbaijan. They've even been sending Syrian mercenaries into Azerbaijan to help them. And in the late 2010s, in 2016, 2017 onwards, the conflict heated up again. In 2020, there was this Artsakh war, and the Azerbaijanis were able to defeat Armenia, and they took over this territory. And the Turks and the Azerbaijanis essentially want Armenia to cease to exist. Israel is supporting Azerbaijan because a significant portion of the population of northwest Iran is ethnic Azerbaijanis, Azeris. And if Israel helps Azerbaijan, it will be able to influence the Iranian Azerbaijanis too, which could be problematic for Iran. Iran and Israel obviously have this mortal enmity. Iran has sworn to destroy Israel, so that's the thing that's going on there. Now, Turkey is very anti-India. We know that. They are very pro-Pakistan. We know that. They have been making statements about Kashmir and supporting essentially Pakistan's claim on Kashmir. We know that. So Turkey has historically been an anti-India nation. And now what India is doing is that India is supporting Armenia, and we are also exploring the possibility and the possibility of supporting Cyprus, because Cyprus is also a partition nation. Turkey invaded northern Cyprus in 1974, 76, in the 70s, and partitioned the island. So southern Cyprus is Greek, and northern Cyprus is, well, it's occupied by Turkey essentially. So India now is no longer a pushover in geopolitics. We are in a position to actually influence world events. So what India has done is, India in 2020 sold $40 million worth of radars, Swati radars, to Armenia. So these radars can identify and track incoming artillery within 50 kilometers, irrespective of type or location. Uh, and it's better than the systems that have been produced by Russia and Poland. So this has been sold to Armenia. This was in 2020. Uh, in Last year in September, India locked a deal to export missiles and rockets and ammunition to Armenia, including the Pinaka system, the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launcher, which is a very deadly multi-barrel rocket launching system. So we have sold that to or we are in the process of selling that to Armenia. Also missiles and ammunition. And then we have this 155 million deal for artillery. So one more arms deal that Armenia has signed with India, and we will provide them artillery worth about $155 million. We are exporting 155 millimeter artillery gun systems to Armenia over the next 3 years. So if you look at the cumulative total figure of the sales, that of the arms sales from India to Armenia, it's roughly in the $500 million mark, which is not a trivial amount. There is a substantial amount of money that's involved, which means a lot of Indian arms and ammunition are going to flow into Armenia. It will bolster their capabilities to resist any more aggression from Azerbaijan, which is a proxy of Turkey. Right? So it makes Turkey and Azerbaijan's job difficult. They would like to eradicate Armenia from the world map. It's not that easy. So India is supporting Armenia in this conflict by selling these weapons systems, which will bolster Armenia's capabilities. Now, this is what's happened. This is a news report from 31st of January. Armenia National Security Service exposes new case of high treason. There's a video here, and there's this guy, this individual Armenian person who has been arrested by their intelligence services. It says, as a result of the activities by the National Security Service of Armenia, it was found that an Armenian citizen who is an officer of a military unit and has the rank of captain has been in the center of attention of foreign special services since the beginning of 2021 and was recruited by them. In essence, this person was spying for a foreign special service or a foreign intelligence service. After being assigned to another military unit as the head of one of the services and receiving a proposal to continue collaboration through messages from foreign special services and accepting it, he undertook to collect and hand over to these foreign special services information constituting state and official secrets of the military sphere of Armenia. In April-May 21, he handed over military information constituting a state and service secret to a foreign special service, including information on military equipment purchased from India, for which he received money twice and a mobile phone and so on and so forth. Searches are being carried out, and this person remains in custody, and the criminal investigation is continuing. So in April and May 21, he handed over state secrets, military secrets, to a foreign intelligence service, which included information of military equipment purchased from India. In 21, the only military equipment Armenia had received from India was the Swati radar system, which is a very sophisticated radar system. So this report does not tell us which foreign intelligence service recruited this spy, this traitor. So that's not known. I'm sure they have communicated the details to the Indian government, but this information is not available in public. It's not been publicized. So it could either be Azerbaijan, it could either be Turkey, or maybe some other larger nation whose identity we can only guess at. So what this makes clear is that there is interest about India's military and technological capabilities among various nations. Now, it could look like the fact that Armenia's neighbors or enemies want to know about the capabilities of the new equipment it has purchased, but these enemies of Armenia also have alliances with larger nations, with more powerful nations, who also would be interested in to understand the kind of military technology India is currently developing. In the past, there have been leaks. I remember there was a Scorpion leak. Um, a French military official had leaked certain specifications and parameters of the Scorpion submarines that were being built for India. Scorpion is a French company, as we know. Yes. Uh, so yes, in recent times, there is more and more interest in the military capabilities and the technologies that India is developing. And when you sell arms and ammunition and weapons systems to other nations, it becomes slightly easier for big powers to snoop on what you are doing. So this happens quite often. Uh, when the Abbottabad event happened, when the Americans apparently took out Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, they lost one helicopter, which was a very advanced, cutting edge helicopter. Uh, because of whatever reason, the helicopter crashed, and they had to destroy it, render it inoperable, but they could not take it away from the location. So this helicopter fell into the hands of the Pakistani authorities naturally, and apparently the Pakistanis uh, allowed the Chinese to inspect the helicopter wreckage and glean information and maybe technological know-how from the damaged helicopter. So this sort of thing happens on a routine basis, and now there is interest in India's military capabilities and technology. So I'm sure the Indian government is keeping a very close watch on this matter. They would, our government would certainly like to understand what military secrets were leaked out and to whom this information was given. And once we know who has access to this information now, then we know who else has access to that information, because we know who their allies are going to be. So it looks like there is curiosity and interest in India's military technology, and we are now playing this game. India is now becoming a military technology and systems exporter. So this is going to happen, and this is where we are. So, so yeah, that's an interesting event that people, I'm not sure, have noticed, but it's important for us, and we need to keep a close eye on this. Now let's talk about, what shall we talk about? Right, let's talk about a curious thing. Let's talk about Pakistan for a bit. Shall we talk about Pakistan? Uh, so Pakistan, we know Pakistan is not doing well. Pakistan is on the verge of bankruptcy. Pakistan is typically at any given point in time on the verge of bankruptcy. In the 1970s and 1980s, Pakistan's economy was doing quite well. Of course, they received foreign help, which is mainly help from the US and from the UK as well. And we know the Americans have had this long-standing relationship with Pakistan, which has been very beneficial for Pakistan and the Pakistani army and the Pakistani military. The US essentially funded and financed Pakistani terrorism in India for several decades. We know that. Yeah. Now, of late, Pakistan has been doing very poorly. We know what the meme is, right? The begging ball meme. They have to keep on going to the World Bank, the IMF, the US, and earlier China for bailouts, for cash infusions. And now they are in a situation where they can no longer repay these loans. And when a country is not in a position to repay any of its loans, then oil exporting countries will be extremely reluctant to sell oil to Pakistan, because they're not going to be in a position to pay for that oil. So Pakistan could soon descend into a major economic crisis, energy crisis. They recently had this the blackout, the electrical blackout that lasted more than 24 hours, which was a disaster. It was a nationwide thing. So Pakistan is not doing well. Now, where did Pakistan's big troubles begin is the big question. And one of the indicators of how well a nation is doing is to look at its currency and how the currency has been doing over several years. So let's take a look at Pakistan's currency, the Pakistani rupee. Let's take a look at the screen. Here we are. So let's compare. Let's see how the Pakistani rupee is doing against the euro. This is a chart. It's a 10-year chart. It begins in 2013, and it's all the way to today. Today, as you can see, it has dropped to an abysmally low position. So it's been dropping. But earlier it was doing well. The Pakistani rupee was growing in value. It was growing. It was in a plateau. It grew again. And then from some point around here, it starts dropping. Drop. It keeps dropping. And now it's in a extraordinary low position. So this around over here, yeah, around somewhere around late 2016, early 2017, the drop begins. And that's a steady decline, and there is no coming back from it. Let's take a look at the Pakistani rupee versus the British pound. Once again, you have a steady plateau kind of area, many years, starting from 2013. It gains in value around 2016, and somewhere in late 2016, early 2017, the decline begins, and the decline is still continuing. As once again, it's at the lowest possible value right now. Let's take a look at the Pakistani rupee versus Indian rupee. Once again, we find the Pakistan rupee was strengthening, and sometime in late 2016, early 2017, it started declining. Declines. It tried to gain back some value, and it crashed, and now it's at an abysmally low position. Let's take the Pakistani rupee against the US dollar. Now, the US dollar is a currency that the Americans manipulate. They own the currency. It's a global reserve currency. So as you can see, there is a bit of, this is a very strangely, steadily flat line. Very strange. So clearly there's some manipulation going on here. But once again, and after 2017, it drops. Once again, these are very artificial looking drops. And now it's at an abysmally low position. So the US dollar is a special currency. It's a currency that the Americans can manipulate at will. But look at these three currencies: the euro, the Great Britain pound, okay, and the Indian rupee. The Pakistani rupee declines from late 2016 onwards in all three cases. What was so special about late 2016? What happened in late 2016? This cannot be a coincidence. It was doing well until late 2016, and then it starts declining. In the case of the euro and the British pound and Indian rupee. In each case, it's in late 2016, early 2017 that the decline happens of the Pakistani rupee. Now, what caused this decline is the question. Now, do we remember what happened in late 2016? So there is this date that is kind of etched in people's memory. November 8, 2016. That was the day the Prime Minister of India announced suddenly, late at night, that the Indian currency is being withdrawn, the currency notes, demonetization. So we had demonetization, which happened on 8 November 2016. And from November 2016 onwards, late 2016 onwards, the Pakistani rupee starts declining. It cannot be a coincidence. Now, lots of people in India said that the demonetization was a disaster. It has been bad for the Indian economy. But if you look at the Indian rupee and its performance, it's not really suffered. And India is going from strength to strength right now. But Pakistan's decline begins in November, December 2016 and early 2017. And it has never recovered from that decline. So clearly, demonetization is something that exactly coincides with the beginning of the decline of the Pakistani currency and the Pakistani economy. What is this about? How did that happen? So understand. So it's been how many years? 2016 to 2023, like 6 years. So now we are in a position to see a bigger slice of time and see that yes, it has actually worked. It has actually worked. So why, if it is demonetization that contributed greatly to this, how did it do it? It's very simple. It's not about black money. It's about fake Indian currency notes. The Pakistanis had a printing press or multiple printing presses, which they used to create fake Indian currency notes. And apparently they were pushing in billions of rupees worth of fake currency notes into the Indian market and into the global market, which was causing harm to the Indian economy. It was causing inflation, and it was making Pakistan billions of dollars per year. You print fake Indian currency notes that look very real, and you exchange them on the international market for dollars or gold or whatever. It's going to boost your economy. It's going to earn you billions of dollars every year, and it's going to harm India at the same time. It was a win-win thing for Pakistan, and they had been doing this for at least 2-3 decades. And for whatever reason, the previous Indian governments never looked into this. They never took any action against this. And then Prime Minister Modi goes ahead with this extraordinarily drastic step of making all Indian currency worthless, all the major notes. And it was a very big risk. It was politically dangerous. And yet you see what happens from 2016 onwards. The Pakistani currency starts crashing, and the Pakistani economy from that time onwards has been dropping, has been doing every year more and more poorly, and now today it's on the verge of disaster. So please understand that. Try and see the cause and effect over here. This is by no means a coincidence. In each case, you see the Pakistani rupees decline starts around that time, only after 8 November 2016. So I would say, okay, whatever was told to the Indian public, see, you say one thing, and the effect can be something else. The intention may be something else. You will not say this openly that we want to destroy the Pakistani economy. We won't say that openly, right? But that's what's happened. And you can see the effect very clearly on these charts. The decline starts after November 2016. So from that perspective, demonetization has been an astounding success. It has the nation that considers India to be its prime enemy, the nation that is essentially sworn to destroy India, see where it is today. So yeah, I would say it was a great success, and yeah, that's what's happened. So that's about the Pakistani currency. Now we will revisit Pakistan at the end of today's session, but let's talk about a different matter now. So a couple of weeks ago, I posted this clip on this channel about tanks. I said that the Americans and the Germans are haggling, they're wrangling over the possibility of sending tanks to Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky wants tanks, lots of tanks. And I said that the Americans and the Germans are extremely wary of sending tanks to Ukraine because they don't want the plains of Ukraine to become a disaster for the tanks, a graveyard for American and German tanks. So I said most likely they will not send tanks. And then last week, the announcement was made that the Germans will send Leopard tanks and the Americans will send M1 Abrams tanks. And I got a whole deluge of comments saying, Abhijit, you are so wrong, your analysis is so wrong, and you are stupid. All that, good fun to watch. Now what's happening? What's happening? Was I totally, entirely wrong? Was my analysis deeply flawed? Have I been exposed by what's happening? Let's take a look at what's happening. Let's see. Let's put this on the screen. So yes, the Germans are sending tanks to Ukraine. Where is it? Yes. Let's look at the details. The devil is in the details. So which tank is Germany sending? Germany approves Leopard 1 battle tank exports to Ukraine. Not the Leopard 2, it's a Leopard 1. A package of 29 older tanks could be sent as soon as refurbishments are done. So these tanks are sitting in museums and they will be refurbished and sent to Ukraine. How many? 29, it says here. 29 tanks. Germany has approved the export of older Leopard 1 battle tanks, which would add to the raft of whatever fighting vehicles being promised. These tanks were first produced in the 1960s. It's a 1960s system. And they were all replaced within Germany's own military with Leopard 2 tanks in 2003. That's 2 decades ago. They were all retired. So the Leopard 1 tanks were retired 2 decades ago. They will be refurbished, brought back to life somewhat. And how many? 26 of them, 29 of them will be sent to Ukraine. What a large number that is. 29 tanks. They are being refurbished and so on. All that. After weeks of hesitation, it would make... Okay. So 29 Leopard 1 tanks and 14 Leopard 2A tanks. 14. I'm shocked by the generosity of the Germans. 14 tanks, new ones, and 29 old ones. Wow, wow, viva, like Borat would say. Yeah. So look at the numbers, my dear friends. Now look here. Yeah, once again, Germany authorizes manufacturers to send Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine. Blah blah blah. 14 Leopard 2s and 29 Leopard 1s. Extremely old tanks. The Leopard 1 entered service in the 1960s, and so on. So once again, we're getting the same numbers: 29 Leopard 1s and 14 Leopard 2s. German Leopard tanks without explosive reactive armor should be easy prey for Kornet systems of Russia. That's yeah, interesting. Kornet anti-tank weapon system. So how good are the Leopard 2s? This is an article that has been deleted. It's a Turkish article. Ilbab Hezimeti 15 tank ve zehirli araç hışad. I don't know what it says. I don't know the language. Let's look here. This is an article from the National Interest. It's an American publication. Germany's Leopard 2 tank in Syria was beaten badly in battle. La la la. How did that happen? Yeah. So the Turks have been invading Syrian territory and encroaching on Syrian territory, and they have been trying to, well, wipe out the Kurdish people. And they are hand in glove with ISIS. Yes, the Turks. And the Turks operate some of these German Leopard 2 tanks because Turkey is part of NATO, Germany is part of NATO. Both are owned by the US, and so they've been able to acquire Leopard 2 tanks. And it was ISIS, if you read this article, ISIS was able to destroy many. See, Turkish intervention against ISIS. So they've fought with ISIS and they've fought against ISIS also. So prior to the Leopard's arrival, around a dozen Turkish Patton tanks were destroyed by ISIS and Kurdish missiles. The Turkish defense commentators expressed the hope that the tougher Leopard 2 would fare better. Blah 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 blah. So this was shockingly so the Leopard 2A4 retains an older boxy turret configurations which affords less protection from modern anti-tank missiles, especially to the generally more vulnerable rear and side armor, which is a bigger problem in counter-insurgency environment where an attack can come from any direction. This was shockingly illustrated in December 2016 when evidence emerged that numerous Leopard 2s had been destroyed in intense fighting over ISIS-held Al-Bab, a fight that the Turkish military leaders described as a trauma. ISIS apparently destroyed 10 of the supposedly invincible Leopard 2s, 5 by anti-tank missiles, 2 by mines or improvised explosive devices, 1 to rocket or mortar fire, and others whatever. So the Leopard 2 is not some invincible tank, even though it's the most advanced and newest tank that the Germans have, and apparently one of the best tanks in the world, on par with the Abrams, the American Abrams tank. But there you are. So the Leopard 2 is not invincible. Even ISIS was able to destroy a bunch of these Leopard 2 tanks. And the Germans are sending Leopard 1s, 29 Leopard 1s, and only 14 Leopard 2s. Now, the Abrams, M1 Abrams, the Americans are going to send a few M1 Abrams. The Americans are being extremely generous. They're sending 31 M1A2 Abrams tanks. But it could take months, even the better part of a year, for Ukraine to get those tanks, because the Americans have to make changes to those tanks. They have to remove the uranium from the tanks and then swap in tungsten. So even those 31 tanks will take maybe up to a year to reach the Ukrainians. Just 31 tanks. Germany is sending 29 plus 14 is how much? It's 43. And the Americans are sending 31. So 74 tanks in total are going to reach Ukraine. It's going to take months or maybe 1 year to get those 74 tanks. What do you do with 74 tanks against the might of the Russian army? I really wonder. Yeah. So this is going to take a whole lot of time. The swapping of the uranium for the tungsten, the depleted uranium. So yeah, that's where we are. So the serious report says Germany admits Leopard tanks to be sent to Ukraine will not be deployed for 3 to 4 months. And 14 tanks is less than 4% of the total number Germany has. This is tokenism, not support. So there was a big, there's a lot of criticism of the allies of the NATO nations for giving verbal support to Ukraine, but not material support. So now they have been shamed into sending these little things: 14 tanks, 29 tanks, 31 tanks, which will make no difference whatsoever to the big picture. Yeah, this is tokenism, not support. After all the arm twisting, Germany is proposing to send 14 Leopard tanks to Ukraine. That is about as much use as a chocolate teapot. So that is the deal. So I leave it for you to decide and to judge whether my analysis was correct, or whether I've been totally exposed by the fact that the NATO nations are now sending tanks. It's tokenism. It's token support. It's not real support. If they want to really support Ukraine, they need to send at least a few hundred tanks to Ukraine. That might make a difference. The Russians have thousands of tanks. These 74 tanks will be steamrolled by the Russian advance whenever it comes. The Russians are going to put hundreds of tanks into battle whenever they do that. So yeah, this tokenism is a joke. They're Ukraine is a buffer. Ukraine is a sacrifice. They wanted to force Russia to fire the first shots, and they used Ukraine for that. And that allowed them to impose sanctions on Russia and portray Russia as the biggest bad guy in the world. But Ukraine is being sacrificed. Ukraine is being sacrificed. They're going to fight to the last Ukrainian and to the last inch of Ukrainian territory. And other European countries are sending a few more tanks, a dozen here, a dozen there, maybe 100 or so, mostly older models. It's going to make no real difference. So this is all tokenism. Ukraine is being sacrificed in real time in front of our eyes. So whenever the big Russian advance comes, which it will most likely at some point in time, these tanks will make no difference, and Ukraine is in deep trouble, and we know it's been in deep trouble for a while. Now, since we're talking about Russia, let's talk about a different aspect of the geopolitical environment which has been upset by the Ukraine conflict. Let me put a different news report on the screen. Iran and Russia. Russia and Iran. Here we are. This is a Reuters report from which date? January 30, this past week. Iran, just about a week or so ago, Iran and Russia link banking systems amid Western sanctions. We know about the Western sanctions. Russia has been cut off from the SWIFT system. Iran also has been cut off from the SWIFT system. So now Iran and Russia have connected their interbank communication and transfer systems to help boost trade and financial transactions. Since the 2018 reimposition of US sanctions on Iran after Washington ditched the 2015 nuclear deal, the Islamic Republic has been disconnected from the Belgium-based SWIFT financial messaging service, which is a key international banking access point and choke point. And similar limitations have been slapped on some Russian banks since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine last year. So Iranian banks no longer need to use SWIFT with Russian banks, and so on. That's the deal. So once again, a different news report from AP News, Associated Press. Iran and Russia move to link banks to evade Western sanctions. The same thing. The SWIFT financial messaging system, which is based in Belgium, moves daily billions of dollars around the world among more than 11,000 banks and financial institutions, including Indian banks and financial institutions. SWIFT is the backbone of all these international transactions. This is from Russia Briefing. So once again, the same thing. The agreement, officials of the central banks of Russia and Iran signed this agreement, which calls for the 52 Iranian bank branches that currently use Iran's local interbank telecom system known as SEPAM, SEPAM, to connect with the 106 banks using Russia's system for transfer of financial messages, or SPFS. So that is what is happening. So this is a counter move to SWIFT. So this is by Richard Medhurst. Russia and Iran just connected all their banks. This is their middle finger to SWIFT. 52 Iranian banks under SIPAM and 106 Russian banks under SPFS can now talk to each other and transact with each other. Weaponizing SWIFT and the US dollar is speeding up the birth of a new system where sanctions don't work. So I think many countries are now looking for alternatives. You cannot, put all your eggs in one basket. You can't have a single system that underlines all of your entire all your transactions with the rest of the world, especially when that system is controlled by one nation that happens to be part of EU, which and Belgium, is it part of NATO? Most likely it may be. Let me just quickly Google it. Belgium, NATO. Is it part of NATO? Yes, Belgium is a founding member of NATO. So we know that NATO is owned by the US. The EU is owned by the US. Therefore, SWIFT is also, even though it may be in Belgium, it's owned by the US. So the US can disconnect any nation from SWIFT, which is a disaster for that nation, which is one of the heaviest and toughest sanctions you can impose on any nation. So now the Russians and the Iranians have bypassed this system, and they are integrating their banks and and to some extent their economies. The Chinese may get involved, and we know that the entire world is looking for alternatives. There is talk of a BRICS currency. If there's a BRICS currency, there could be a BRICS interconnected system also, which could, and lots of nations want to be part of BRICS now. So things are happening. Things are moving. We may be witnessing attempts to create a parallel system, an alternative system to the Western rules-based international order. So that is something that's quite interesting that's happening right now. And this is something that's already been accomplished. The Russians and the Iranians have gone ahead and done this. They have linked their banking systems. What else is happening? Let's circle back to Pakistan. Let's put this on the screen. So this is the question someone asked me when I did this offline Ask Abhijit session in the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore about the Indus Waters Treaty. So India sends a tough message to Pakistan, issues notice of modification to Indus Water Treaty. This treaty was signed in the 1960s. It was the World Bank, which is owned by the US, which brokered this treaty between India and Pakistan. It's one of the historically most one-sided treaties you can imagine. About 80% of the water goes to Pakistan. India retains only 20% of the water. And our magnificent, great Prime Minister, Mr. Nehru, agreed to this incredibly one-sided agreement, which benefits Pakistan and does not and is very bad for India. So India has sent a message to Pakistan, and it's issued a notice of modification of the Indus Water Treaty. So there is no need for a nation to keep on agreeing to a treaty that is not in its benefit. Every nation has the right to walk away from treaties. The Americans had signed the nuclear agreement, which I just spoke about with Iran, and they walked away from it. They broke the treaty because it was not in their benefit. The US President, Mr. Trump, at the time decided it was not beneficial to the US, and that's why he unilaterally walked away from the treaty. Every nation has the right to do this. The Chinese had this agreement with the UK about Hong Kong, the one nation, two systems agreement. The Chinese unilaterally broke the agreement because they said it's our right to walk away from an agreement. So India also has the right to walk away from an agreement or to modify an agreement if it is not beneficial to India. We are under no obligation to keep on agreeing to a one-sided treaty. And the World Bank or any other nation or any other organization or nation has no right to tell India what to do. So India has sent this message. What does it say? So this treaty was from 1960. The notice was conveyed on January 25 this year to the Pakistanis. What is it all about? So in 2015, Pakistan had requested for the appointment of a neutral expert to examine some objections to India's Kishanganga and Ratle hydroelectric projects. The Pakistanis unilaterally retracted this request and proposed a court of arbitration adjudicate on this. And there's all this going on. So the World Bank is getting involved in this. They are interfering in this. So the Indian government has said that the World Bank cannot interpret this treaty. India has insisted that the treaty provides a graded mechanism for handling such issues, which should first be handled by the commissioners for Indus waters of the two countries, then a neutral expert, then ultimately a court of arbitration. Once India is in a stronger position in 5-10 years, we can just unilaterally decide what is to be done. Right now, we're talking about a graded mechanism and all that. So India has questioned the World Bank's decision to go ahead and with two parallel processes to address this dispute, which and says that this is not in consonance with the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty. So the World Bank is doing something that is not in consonance with the treaty that it itself oversaw. Um, so India wants to renegotiate this treaty brokered by the World Bank. And there, you can read the article. It goes into the details of what the objections are and what the World Bank is trying to do. Now, this is an interesting article. PM Modi gave hint of Indus Water Treaty rethink after the Uri attack of 2016. It's a brief article. Let's take a look at it. A hint of the Narendra Modi government's rethink on the Indus Water Treaty came for the first time in September 2016. Blood and water cannot flow together, the Prime Minister had told officials attending a treaty review meeting that took place 11 days after Pakistan-backed terrorists attacked the Indian Army base at Uri in Jammu, killing 18 soldiers. Less than 2 years later, the Prime Minister in May 2018 inaugurated a 330 megawatt Kishan Ganga Hydel project at Bandipur and led the foundation stone for a 1000 megawatt plant at Kishtwar in Jammu and Kashmir. Two other large hydel projects, Sawalkot 1856 megawatts and Bursar 800 megawatts, were also fast-tracked soon after the September 2016 treaty review meeting mentioned earlier. These projects indicate that the government was ready to respond to Islamabad's use of terror against India with every option, including denying Pakistan's liberal flow of Indus water in excess of the 1960 treaty's provisions. The launch of the Pakal Dul project, which has been hanging fire for a decade, underlined the Modi government's intent to fast-track infrastructure on the Indus water system to maximize India's water use within the treaty's ambit and hopefully in the future take more. This includes building hydel projects on various tributaries like the Chenab and the Jhelum, as well as streams feeding them. Since then, the center has fast-tracked a slew of stalled hydel projects aggregating nearly 4,000 megawatt capacity in Jammu and Kashmir, and various foundation stones have been laid down. A 2011 report by a US Committee on Foreign Relations said that India could use these projects as a way to control Pakistan's supply from the Indus, consider its jugular vein. The cumulative effect of these projects could give India the ability to store enough water to limit the supply to Pakistan at crucial moments in the growing season. Clearly, speeding up pending hydel projects and storage infrastructure is a key component of India's Indus strategy, as the treaty in its present form allows India to build storage capacities up to 3.6 million acre feet for various purposes. So India is now taking this matter very seriously. Simply threatening Pakistan that we will revise the treaty or whatever is just words. But when you start building capability, when you start building these projects, dams and various other projects, reservoirs and all that, canals, then you can actually translate those words into real world actions. And India is now fast tracking a bunch of projects, which is, I would say, still early days, but we are now doing this. And in a few years, we'll be capable of denying Pakistan water at crucial moments in its growing season and all that. See, we have nothing against the people of Pakistan, but the Pakistani nation is a nation that is sworn to destroy India, and they have played this terrorist angle for decades, supported by much larger powers. So India needs to be in a position to give it back to Pakistan, and by building the capability to store water from the Indus River system, and thereby deny Pakistan water if required, that gives India a significant advantage. So India is now no longer doing a war with words. It's actually walking the talk. It's still early days. We need to build a much larger capacity, which will definitely happen over the next 10-20 years. I don't know if Pakistan will last that long, because as we know, what is Pakistan? We know what it is, right? It's a temporary nation. But still, India should have the capacity to store water as and when required. And India has now told Pakistan, we want to renegotiate the treaty. This treaty is not something that we can agree to anymore. The World Bank is trying to support Pakistan. The World Bank is owned by the US, more or less. So these nations always do that, and these organizations always do that. They have consistently been anti-India. And the US, these are facts. I am not being emotional or judgmental here. I'm talking about facts. The US has consistently been anti-India. They these days are more favorably inclined towards India because of the China angle and the China threat. But they still view Pakistan as an integral part of their anti-India policy to keep India off balance, to counterbalance India. And this support for Pakistan is part of that strategy. So there you are. So that's something that's happening. India is now walking the talk, and India wants to renegotiate the treaty, amend the treaty, make it more equitable. 80% of the water cannot keep going to Pakistan. Why the hell should it? So yeah, it's to some extent a pressure tactic, but to some extent it's actually walking the talk. So interesting development there. And the seeds of this entire matter were planted in 2016. That's when India's Prime Minister decided that we need to change things up and create and build the capacity to divert the waters and store the waters if required, as and when required, because it's our right to do so. All right, what next? Okay, one more thing. So I spoke a week or two about Nikki Haley, that she might consider running for throwing her hat into the ring and running for the Republican nomination for the US presidency for the 2024 elections. So the Republicans, as we know, President Trump has already announced his candidature. He wants to run for 2024. He wants to be the Republican nominee for the 2024 presidential elections. He's running on an anti-World War III campaign, which is a brilliant move, I would say. Yeah. So that's interesting. But it looks like Nikki Haley may also be preparing to throw her hat into the ring. And let's briefly take a look at her tweet, which she tweeted a couple of days ago. This is a tweet from February 1, which is like 3 days ago. So she says, "My family and I have a big announcement to share with you on February 15th. And yes, it's definitely going to be a great day in South Carolina. Be sure to RSVP here." So it looks like she is preparing the ground for a presidential announcement. Interesting. There are plenty of other candidates within the Republican Party itself. There is Ron DeSantis. There are other people, but Nikki Haley seems to be getting ready for announcing her candidature. Overall, she did very well during the Trump presidency. The Trump presidency was kind of a revolving door for various officials who were hired and then fired very rapidly by Donald Trump. That was a style of functioning. Nikki Haley was not fired by Trump. She was the US ambassador to the United Nations. She did a very good job. She definitely burnished her credentials as the US ambassador to the UN, and then she resigned of her own volition, which came to many people perhaps as a surprise. So she was one high-ranking official who was not fired by Trump. She chose when to leave the position. So she came out of this with her credentials embellished and strengthened, and now it looks like she may be getting ready for a presidential candidacy. So if she actually does that, let's see how it goes. Typically, minorities don't do well in the US, especially Indians. Now, this lady obviously has converted to Christianity, and she has changed her name also from Nimrata to Nikki. So she looks and feels very American. Obviously, she's an Indian. She's a brown person, but typically it's hard for minorities. The only exception has been Obama, and these days it's all about all that, right? These days we have an Indian or half Indian origin vice president, Miss Kamala Harris. So let's see how this goes, but this is an interesting development. So this is going to be a very political year for the US and for India as well. There's going to be in the US, there's going to be all these presidential announcements for running for president. Then you will have the primaries, which will be held by the Republican Party for deciding their candidate. And then we have to see what happens to Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden is clearly not in a position to manage himself, let alone an entire nation. So will he be allowed by his party, by the deep state to run for president again in 2024? Or Will Kamala Harris, will he be made to resign? Will Kamala Harris be the nominee for the Democrats in 24, or will something else entirely happen? It's very interesting. It's an uncertain time, so this is going to be a very interesting and very political year in the US and also in India, because in 2024 in India we have the general elections for the for the Lok Sabha, the parliament. So it's going to be very interesting this year, and we will keep discussing this, and we'll keep a very close eye on this, Matt, on these two very political years for the US and for India, for the two largest democracies in the world. So yeah, that's about it for today. It is it's great to be back amongst you all and do this live stream. And so yeah, I'll stop over here. These are the matters I wanted to speak about. I will see you tomorrow in the Ask Abhijit live stream. Until then, I take your leave. Take care. Good night, good day, wherever you are, and I will see you very soon. Thank you. Bye.